The wind screamed across the frozen wasteland of Fort Greely, Alaska, carrying sheets of snow that stung like needles against exposed skin. It was Christmas Eve, though you'd never know it from the desolate white emptiness stretching in every direction. The temperature had dropped to -30, and the world had shrunk to nothing but ice, darkness, and the distant howl of Arctic wind. Inside the long-range firing complex, warmth radiated from industrial heaters that struggled against the cold, seeping through every crack. Sergeant First Class Marcus Holland stood at the window, watching the blizzard intensify. Behind him, the Delta Force sniper team was celebrating their latest achievement, a 2,200-meter shot that had shattered their previous record. "That's how it's done." Corporal Jake Patterson slapped the table, causing beer bottles to rattle. Wind reading was perfect. Bullet drop compensation was textbook. Nobody's touching that record for years. Staff Sergeant Ryan Chen laughed, raising his bottle. "Not in this weather, that's for damn sure." Conditions were brutal. The door opened, letting in a gust of Arctic air that made everyone turn. A figure stepped inside, small, compact, moving with the careful economy of someone who had learned to conserve energy in hostile environments. She was maybe 5'5", dressed in standard-issue winter gear that seemed too large for her frame. What caught everyone's attention wasn't her size, but the scar that ran from her left eyebrow down to her cheekbone, a pale line against weather-darkened skin. "That's the new transfer?" Patterson whispered. "She looks like she's barely out of basic." Ariana Hale, call sign Frostbite, though nobody here knew that yet, said nothing as she made her way to the weapons locker. Her movements were precise, economical. She didn't acknowledge the stares or the sudden drop in conversation volume. Holland straightened, trying to remember the brief personnel file he'd skimmed that morning. "You're Hale? Ariana Hale?" "Yes, Sergeant." Her voice was quiet, steady, with no inflection. Her eyes pale gray, almost colorless, swept across the room once before returning to the weapons locker. "We weren't expecting you until after the holidays." Holland tried to sound welcoming, though something about her stillness made him uneasy. "Roads are going to be impassable for at least another week with this storm." "I flew in 2 hours ago. Last transport before they grounded everything." She opened the locker and reached for the M2010 enhanced sniper rifle with the familiarity of someone who had handled the weapon countless times. Chen exchanged glances with Patterson. "Hey, new girl," Chen called out. "That's not a starter weapon. We've got." "I'm qualified." Ariana didn't look at him as she began field stripping the rifle with smooth, practiced movements. Her hands moved independently, checking each component with the kind of muscle memory that only came from thousands of repetitions. Patterson snorted. "Qualified doesn't mean you should." "Let her work," Holland interrupted, though his eyes narrowed as he watched her hands. The speed, the precision, it wasn't standard. "Where'd you transfer from, Hale?" "Classified." She finished reassembling the rifle in under a minute, then moved to check the ammunition stores. The room went quiet. In Delta Force, classified could mean a lot of things, but, combined with that scar and the way she moved, like someone who'd seen combat in places that didn't officially exist, it raised questions nobody was quite ready to ask on Christmas Eve. Chen broke the silence with forced joviality. "Well, since you're here, you might as well hear about our new record. Patterson here, just 2,200 meters, Ariana said softly, not looking up from the ammunition crate. Wind speed 12 to 15 knots, gusting. Temperature -28. Bullet drop approximately 31 feet, give or take." She paused, running her thumb along a .300 Winchester Magnum round, good shooting for stable conditions. Patterson's smile faded. "Stable? We had. Your elevation was constant. Wind was steady after the initial gust pattern. Target was stationary." She finally looked up, her pale eyes meeting his. It was good shooting, but it wasn't difficult shooting. The temperature in the room seemed to drop another 10 degrees. Holland stepped forward, his voice careful. "Hale, I don't know what standards you're used to, but in this unit, let me take one shot." Ariana's voice didn't rise, but something in those 4 words made everyone stop. She stood, holding the M2010, and looked at each member of the team in turn. "Same conditions as your record attempt, 1 shot. If I miss, I'll clean weapons and latrines for the next month." Chen laughed first, the tension breaking like ice cracking. "Oh, this is going to be good. Hey guys, the new transfer wants to..." And if I don't miss? Ariana's expression didn't change. Patterson leaned back in his chair, grinning. Then I guess we'll have a new record. But sweetheart, you're talking about conditions that... Don't call me sweetheart. Still no emotion in her voice, but the room temperature seemed to drop further. Yes or no, Sergeant Holland? Holland studied her for a long moment. There was something in her stance, in the way she held the rifle, that made him hesitate. This wasn't bravado. This was something else entirely. All right, he said slowly. But we do this by the book. Full safety protocols. And Hale, when you miss, I expect you to accept it with grace. When I don't miss, she said quietly, I expect the same. The wind had picked up by the time they assembled on the firing range. Snow fell so thick it was like trying to see through a white curtain. The temperature had dropped to -32. Cold enough that exposed skin would freeze in minutes. Most of the team had bundled up in additional layers, but Ariana wore only standard winter gear. She's going to freeze her ass off before she even takes the shot, Patterson muttered to Chen. The target, a steel plate 18 inches in diameter, had been positioned at 2,200 meters, the same distance as Patterson's record shot. The wind howled across the open range, creating unpredictable eddies and gusts that could push a bullet off course by several feet. Holland checked the equipment while Ariana stood motionless, her eyes closed, face tilted slightly into the wind. She looked almost peaceful, like someone standing on a beach feeling the ocean breeze. Wind speed varying between 13 and 19 knots, Holland called out, reading from the anemometer. Temperature -32 and dropping. Hale, are you sure you want to do this? We can wait for better conditions. She opened her eyes. The wind doesn't hate anyone, she said softly, almost to herself. It just tells you what to do. Chen laughed. That's poetic and all, but it doesn't change physics. You've got maybe a 30-second window between gusts. I need 1 second. Ariana moved to the firing position, settling into the prone stance with the kind of stillness that comes from spending hours, days, weeks in similar positions. She adjusted the rifle's bipod with minute movements, her breathing already slowing. Patterson set up the spotting scope. All right, new girl, let's see what you've got. Remember, 1 shot, no warm-up rounds, no adjustments. Ariana didn't respond. She was already somewhere else. Her entire world narrowed to the feel of the wind on her exposed skin, the weight of the rifle, the rhythm of her breathing. Holland watched her through his binoculars. Her finger rested along the trigger guard, not on the trigger itself. Professional, her breathing had slowed to the point where her chest barely moved. Also professional. But there was something else, something in the way she seemed to merge with the weapon, becoming part of the system rather than just the operator. Wind gust coming in, Chen called out. 19 knots from the northwest. Ariana didn't move. She was waiting for something. The gust hit the range, sending up clouds of powder snow. Patterson smirked. And there goes any chance of... The rifle cracked. The sound was sharp, definitive, followed immediately by the distinctive whine of a 300 Winchester Magnum round, cutting through Arctic air at 2,700 feet per second. The bullet traced an invisible arc through the falling snow, fighting wind and gravity and the sheer physical impossibility of the shot. Patterson had his eye pressed to the spotting scope, ready to call the miss. His expression was already shifting into a patronizing smile when, holy shit! The steel target rang like a bell, the sound carrying back to them across the frozen wasteland. But it wasn't just a hit. Through his scope, Patterson could see exactly where the round had impacted. Dead center. No fucking way, Chen breathed. Check the distance. Check the... Distance is confirmed, Holland said, his voice strangely flat. 2,200 meters. He lowered his binoculars, staring at Ariana, who was already standing up, breaking down the rifle with the same mechanical precision she'd shown earlier. How did you? The gust wasn't the problem, Ariana said quietly, not looking at any of them. The gust was the solution. It created a pressure differential that compensated for the crosswind. You just had to wait for it. She finished disassembling the rifle, each piece moving to its proper place in the case. Your record shot was good, Corporal Patterson, but you fought the wind. I used it. Patterson's face had gone through several shades of red. That was, you can't just, it's not possible to calculate that in real time. The variables alone. I didn't calculate it. Ariana finally looked at him, and for the first time, There was something almost like emotion in her pale eyes. I felt it. You can't fight the wind. You have to listen to what it's telling you. Holland pulled out his radio. Control, this is Holland. I need confirmation on target impact at range Charlie 3. He waited, watching Ariana, who had gone back to her distant, detached state. Roger that. Impact confirmed at. What? He looked up sharply. Say again? Chen grabbed the radio. Control, this is Chen. Confirm distance to target? The voice on the other end was clear. Target impact at 2,350 meters. Repeat, 2,350 meters. We had to double-check the laser rangefinder. Complete silence fell over the group. The wind howled, snow fell, and 6 experienced Delta Force snipers stood staring at a woman who shouldn't exist. The target drifted, Ariana said softly. Wind pushed it back another 150 meters during setup. I adjusted. She picked up the rifle case. Where do you want me to rack this? Nobody answered for a long moment. Finally, Holland found his voice. You casually adjusted for a target movement you couldn't possibly see, and made a shot, that's. He trailed off, shaking his head. Who the hell are you, Hale? For the first time, something flickered across her face. Pain, maybe, or memory. I'm the person who doesn't miss, she said quietly. Not anymore. The celebration that followed was muted, awkward. Nobody quite knew how to process what they'd witnessed. Ariana had excused herself almost immediately, retreating to the barracks while the team gathered in the rec room, ostensibly to celebrate Christmas, but really to try to make sense of the new transfer. I'm telling you, that shot was impossible, Patterson insisted, nursing his third beer. The physics don't work. She would have needed to calculate wind speed, temperature differentials, Coriolis effect, and target drift in under 10 seconds. She did calculate it, Chen countered. Just not the way we do. You saw her standing there with her eyes closed. She was reading the wind. That's not a thing, Patterson shot back. You can't just feel, can't you? Holland's voice cut through the argument. He was sitting apart from the group, his laptop open. I've been going through our personnel database. Hale's file is mostly redacted. Almost everything before her transfer here is classified above our clearance level. That got everyone's attention. Let me see. Chen moved closer. What's not redacted? Basic information. Born in Montana. Enlisted at 18. Sniper school at Fort Benning, graduated top of her class with the highest accuracy rating in the school's history. Holland scrolled down. Then, nothing. 5 years of nothing. Just a posting code that's blacked out and a transfer authorization from JSOC, Joint Special Operations Command. The guys who ran the most classified operations in the military. And the scar? Patterson asked quietly. Holland found the medical section. Most of it was redacted, but one entry remained. Facial laceration from shrapnel. Treated in field. Subject refused medical evacuation. There was a date 3 years ago and a location code that had been blacked out. She got that in combat, Holland said softly. And she refused to leave. He looked up at his team. Whatever she did during those 5 years, it wasn't standard deployment. Chen had pulled out his own phone, his expression troubled. Marcus, you need to see this. He turned the screen around. It showed a news article from 2 years ago, partially translated from German. The headline read, Unidentified forces prevent terrorist attack in Alpine region. Scroll down, Chen said. Holland read aloud. According to witnesses, a single sniper neutralized 3 heavily armed militants from an estimated distance of over 1,900 meters during a blizzard. The precision of the shots, executed in near-zero visibility conditions, has led to speculation about. He stopped. It says one witness described the shooter as a ghost in the snow, someone who appeared, took the shots, and vanished before authorities arrived. That's her, Patterson said with certainty. That's got to be her. Holland kept reading, his expression growing darker. It says the militants were part of a cell that had been targeting NATO supply lines. The attack was only stopped because, he paused, because someone warned local authorities with precise intelligence about the militants' position and timing. Someone who had been tracking them. A hunter, Chen said quietly. The door opened. Ariana stood in the entrance, her expression unreadable. You're all terrible at whispers, she said softly. I could hear you from the hallway. Holland stood up slowly. Hale, we weren't. Yes, you were. And you should be. She moved into the room, her movements careful, controlled. You need to know who you're working with. What I'm capable of. What I've done. She pulled up a chair, sitting down with the rigid posture of someone testifying. 5 years ago, I was recruited into a joint NATO counterterrorism unit, specialized in alpine and Arctic warfare. We tracked high-value targets in regions where conventional forces couldn't operate. The European Alps, Holland said. Ariana nodded. Switzerland, Austria, northern Italy. Anywhere the mountains made normal military operations impossible. She touched the scar on her face unconsciously. We were good, very good. For 3 years, we prevented 17 major attacks, took down cells that had been operating for decades. What happened? Chen asked gently. We got too good. Ariana's voice was flat, emotionless. We became a target ourselves. 3 years ago, we were tracking a cell leader, a man named Viktor Volkov, former Russian Spetsnaz turned mercenary. We had solid intelligence on his location. We set up for a standard interdiction. She fell silent for a long moment. It was a trap, Patterson said quietly. Yes, they knew we were coming. They'd prepared positions, booby-trapped the entire area. When we moved in, she stopped, her hand tightening on the edge of the table. There were 7 of us. Within 60 seconds, there were 2. Me and my commanding officer, Captain Elizabeth Morrison. Holland felt his chest tighten. The scar? Grenade. Rolled right toward Captain Morrison. I pushed her aside, tried to kick it away. Didn't get far enough. Ariana's fingers traced the scar again. Shrapnel took the left side of my face. I should have lost the eye. Should have died from shock and blood loss in the snow. But you didn't, Chen said. No, I stayed conscious long enough to drag Captain Morrison to cover. Then I found a position with line of sight to Volkov's command post. Her pale eyes were distant now, seeing something none of them could. 1,900 meters. Blizzard conditions. My face was half gone. I was probably minutes from bleeding out. You took the shot, Holland breathed. I took the shot. Volkov was addressing his men, telling them how they'd crushed the NATO unit. I put a round through his radio equipment first, wanted him to know someone was still out there. Then I put the second round through him. She looked up, meeting Holland's eyes. Captain Morrison survived long enough to call for extraction. I didn't leave until she was stable. By the time medical arrived, I'd lost enough blood that they said I should have been dead for an hour. The room was absolutely silent, except for the wind outside. They gave me the option to retire, Ariana continued. Medical discharge, full benefits. I refused. Spent 9 months in rehabilitation, training my eye to compensate for the nerve damage, rebuilding my shooting position to account for the scar tissue. She stood up. I requested transfer to Delta Force 3 months ago. I didn't come here for glory or respect. I came here because intelligence indicates Volkov survived. Patterson choked on his beer. What? The body was never recovered. There's been chatter, communications, intercepts, suggesting he's operating in the Northern Territories, organizing something big. Ariana moved to the window, looking out at the blizzard. JSOC thinks he's planning attacks on U.S. installations in Alaska, using the same tactics he used on us remote locations, extreme weather, strike teams operating in conditions where conventional response is impossible. And you want to be here when he makes his move, Holland said. I want to finish what I started. Ariana turned back to face them. I don't need your approval or your friendship. I just need you to trust that when the moment comes, I won't miss. I can't afford to miss. Not again. Chen cleared his throat. The file said you refused medical evacuation. Why? Ariana's expression softened slightly. The first real emotion they'd seen, because Captain Morrison was still breathing, because 5 of my team were already dead and I wasn't going to make it 6, because she stopped, swallowing hard. Because that's what snipers do. We stay, we watch, we protect. Holland stood, extending his hand. Then I guess we're lucky to have you, Frostbite. She looked at the offered hand, then up at his face. You know the call sign. It's in the file. Under a lot of redaction, but it's there. He kept his hand extended. Welcome to the team. For real? This time? Ariana hesitated, then shook his hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. Now, Holland said, releasing her hand, Let's talk about this Volkov situation, because if he's planning something in our territory, I want every piece of intel you have." Ariana nodded, pulling out a folder she'd been carrying. "I've been tracking his communications pattern for 3 months. There's something happening soon, very soon, and it's going to be—" The alarm cut through the air like a knife. Red lights began flashing throughout the facility. The PA system crackled to life. "All personnel, code red. Border incursion detected. Northern sector. Multiple hostiles. Repeat, multiple hostiles. This is not a drill." Holland grabbed his radio. "Holland to command. Situation report." The voice that came back was tense. "We've got 5, possibly 6 hostile contacts. They've ambushed one of our patrol units near the northern border. Unit is pinned down, requesting immediate support." "It's Christmas Eve," Patterson said, his voice hollow. "Who the hell launches an operation on Christmas Eve?" Ariana's face had gone pale. "Someone who knows most of the base will be at minimal staffing. Someone who's been planning this for months." She looked at Holland. "It's Volkov. I know his tactics. This is him." "We don't know that," Holland started. "Check the location of the ambush." Ariana's voice was urgent now. "I'll bet it's in an area with limited vehicle access, rough terrain, positions that favor defenders with long-range capabilities." Holland relayed the question to command, then went still. "Jesus Christ, it's the Denali Pass approach. Narrow valley, high walls on both sides, perfect kill zone." "It's him," Ariana said with certainty. "And he's not here for territory. He's here for leverage. He'll use the captured patrol as bait to draw in a rescue force, then eliminate them. Maximum casualties, maximum psychological impact." "How do you know?" Chen demanded. "Because it's exactly what he did to us." Ariana was already moving toward the weapons locker, except this time, he won't be expecting someone who knows his playbook. Holland made a decision in that instant, the kind of call that defines a leader. "Gear up. Full Arctic load. We move in 20 minutes. Sergeant, regulations say we need authorization from Patterson started." "There are American soldiers dying in the snow." Holland cut him off. "We're the closest qualified unit. We go now, or we go to funerals later. Your choice." Nobody argued. As the team rushed to prepare, Ariana stood by the weapons locker, checking her rifle one more time. Her hands were steady, her breathing controlled. But her eyes, those pale, distant eyes, held something Holland recognized. Anticipation. The hunter had found her prey. The Chinook helicopter fought against wind that tried to tear it from the sky. Inside, 6 Delta Force operators and 1 recently arrived sniper sat in grim silence, each lost in their own thoughts as the aircraft bucked and shuddered through the storm. Holland reviewed the tactical situation on his tablet, his face illuminated by the blue glow. "Intel says we've got at least 6 hostiles, possibly more. They've established positions on both sides of the valley. Our patrol force soldiers is pinned down approximately 300 meters from the hostiles' primary position." "What's their status?" Chen asked. 3 wounded, 1 providing suppressing fire. They've got maybe an hour of ammunition left." Holland looked up. "Weather's getting worse. This might be our only insertion window." Patterson checked his gear for the 3rd time. "What's the plan?" "Standard rescue operation. We insert 1 click south of the valley, approach on foot. Chen and Morrison provide overwatch from the western ridge. Patterson and I take the assault element down the valley floor. Richards and Thompson secure the extraction point. And me?" Ariana's voice was quiet but cut through the helicopter's noise. Holland hesitated. "You just got here, Hale. Nobody expects you to." "Where do you need me?" She wasn't asking permission. He studied her for a moment, then made another command decision. "You're with Chen on overwatch. If what you said about Volkov is true, he'll have positioned himself somewhere with maximum coverage of the kill zone. Probably the eastern ridge, maybe 600 to 800 meters from the patrol's position." "Further," Ariana said immediately, "Volkov likes distance, makes him feel safe. He'll be at least 1,000 meters out, possibly 1,500, and he won't be on the obvious high ground. He'll be offset, somewhere that provides coverage, but isn't the first position a counter sniper would check." Chen looked skeptical. "That's a lot of assumptions about someone you haven't seen in 3 years." "I know how he thinks." Ariana's tone left no room for argument. "I spent 18 months tracking him. I know his habits, his preferences, his tells. He'll be northeast of the patrol's position, elevated, with a clear exit route. She pulled out her own tablet, calling up the topographical map. Here, this ridge. It's technically suboptimal for direct fire, but it gives him angles on both the patrol and any rescue attempt. Holland enlarged the area she'd indicated. The ridge was set back from the main valley, almost obscured by a rock formation. That's nearly 1,400 meters from the patrol's position. That's why he'll be there. Nobody else would take that position. It's too far for a reliable shot in these conditions. Ariana's finger traced possible lines of fire, but Volkov doesn't need reliability. He needs one good shot at the right moment, one that breaks the rescue operation and forces retreat. And you think you can counter-snipe from that range? Patterson didn't bother hiding his skepticism. I know I can. No boast, just statement of fact. The pilot's voice crackled through their headsets. 2 minutes to drop zone. Conditions are deteriorating. We're going to have to make this fast. Holland made his decision. Hale, you're with Chen on the western ridge, but you follow his lead. This isn't a solo operation. Understood. The Chinook descended into a nightmare of blowing snow and ice. Visibility dropped to near zero as they approached the ground. The rear ramp lowered. An Arctic wind screamed into the cabin. Go! 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 Holland shouted. They dropped into knee-deep snow. The helicopter already pulling away before the last operator cleared the ramp. Within seconds, the aircraft's lights had vanished into the white darkness, and they were alone. Holland activated his tactical radio. Check in. One by one, each operator confirmed status. The wind was so loud that even their radios struggled to compensate. Move out. Chen, Hale, you've got 30 minutes to get into position. Everybody else, with me. The team split up, each element pushing through snow that came up to their thighs in places. Ariana followed Chen up the western slope, her breathing steady despite the brutal physical exertion. The storm was worsening, visibility was down to maybe 15 feet, and the temperature had dropped to -38. You really think he's out here? Chen called back, his voice barely audible over the wind. I know he is. Ariana kept pace effortlessly, her smaller frame actually helping in the deep snow. This is exactly his kind of operation. Isolated target, extreme conditions, psychological impact. He's here. They reached the ridge after 25 minutes of brutal climbing. Chen immediately began setting up his position, clearing snow to create a stable platform for his rifle. Ariana moved past him, to a position slightly higher, and 30 meters to the north. Hale, what are you doing? Chen called. Getting a better angle. She was already setting up her own rifle, working with the kind of speed that came from doing this 1,000 times in worse conditions. Chen hesitated, then decided to trust her instinct. All right, but stay on comms. Roger. Ariana settled into her position, the M2010, an extension of her body. She closed her eyes, letting her other senses take over. The wind patterns, the way the snow moved, the subtle shifts in air pressure that indicated changes in the storm's intensity. And then, she felt it. That same presence she'd felt 3 years ago, right before her world exploded into blood and fire. Someone was watching. Chen, she said softly into her radio. He's here. Northeast ridge, approximately 1,300 meters. I can feel him. Feel him. Hale, I need concrete. Movement, she interrupted. Northeast ridge, 11 o'clock from your position. Something just shifted. Chen swung his spotting scope to the indicated area. At first, he saw nothing but blowing snow and rock. Then, just for a moment, a shape that didn't belong. A shadow against shadows. I've got something. Can't confirm if it's... The patrol's position erupted in gunfire. Down in the valley, their trapped soldiers were taking fire from multiple positions. All elements, move now. Holland's voice over the radio. Patterson, with me. Ariana watched through her scope as the assault began. Holland and Patterson moved down the valley floor, using available cover. The hostile fire intensified, multiple weapons tracking their approach. And then she saw it. On the northeast ridge, a flash of movement, someone repositioning, someone preparing to take a shot at Holland's advancing team. Contact, she said calmly. Northeast ridge, 1,300 meters, preparing to engage. Hale, wait for confirmation. Chen started. But Ariana was already adjusting her rifle, reading the wind, calculating the impossible mathematics of a shot through a blizzard at a target she could barely see. She watched Holland and Patterson, saw the moment when they would be most exposed. In her mind, she was back in the Alps, snow and blood, the weight of Captain Morrison in her arms, the face of Viktor Volkov through her scope, smiling because he thought he'd won. Not again. She felt the wind shift, felt the brief moment when the storm's chaos aligned into something almost like order, felt the universe narrow to a single point of crystalline clarity. "Let me take one shot," she whispered, and pulled the trigger. The bullet left the barrel at 2,700 feet per second, immediately entering a world of chaos. Wind battered it from 3 directions simultaneously. Temperature differentials created invisible corridors where the air density changed by the meter. Snow crystals added 1,000 tiny impacts, each one microscopically altering the bullet's trajectory. It should have been impossible. But Ariana had stopped thinking about possible or impossible years ago. The bullet climbed, following an arc that existed only in her mind, a path calculated not by mathematics but by instinct, by the accumulated experience of 10,000 shots in conditions that would have grounded most snipers before they even set up. 1,300 meters, 1,320, 1,350. On the northeast ridge, Viktor Volkov settled into his firing position. He could see the rescue team advancing down the valley floor. Predictable, heroic, foolish. In approximately 20 seconds, he would take the lead operator, probably the team leader, based on his position, and the entire rescue would collapse into chaos. He smiled. This was what he did. This was what made him legendary. He never saw the bullet that killed him. 2. The .300 Winchester Magnum round struck him in the center of the chest, punching through body armor, ribs, and the vital organs behind them. The impact threw him backward, his own rifle discharging harmlessly into the air. He had time for one thought: impossible. Then nothing. Down in the valley, Holland heard the distant crack of a rifle distinct from the firefight around him because it came from the wrong direction. He and Patterson froze, weapons up, scanning for new threats. "Holland, this is Hale." Ariana's voice over the radio was steady, almost emotionless. "Primary target neutralized. Northeast ridge. Recommend immediate assault on remaining hostile positions." Chen, watching through his spotting scope, couldn't quite process what he'd just witnessed. "Did you just... at that range, in this storm?" "Secondary targets," Ariana said, already tracking movement on the eastern ridge. 3 hostiles, repositioning, engaging. She fired again, another impossible shot, another hostile down. And again. The 3rd target tried to retreat but moved directly into the path of her bullet. "Jesus Christ," Chen breathed. "She's not missing." Holland didn't waste time questioning miracles. "All elements, assault now. Hostile sniper is down. Move, move, move." The remaining hostiles, suddenly without their long-range coverage and facing an aggressive assault, broke. Within 3 minutes, the firefight was over. 2 hostiles captured, 3 dead, and the rest vanished into the storm. The patrol was secured, all 4 soldiers alive, though 2 needed immediate medical attention. "Extraction inbound." The pilot's voice crackled over the radio. "But weather's at minimum threshold. We've got maybe a 10-minute window." "Copy that." Holland looked up at the western ridge, where Ariana's position was barely visible through the snow. "Chen, Hale, fall back to extraction point." And Chen, "Yeah? Tell Hale, tell her good shooting." The flight back was quieter than the insertion, though the storm hadn't diminished. The rescued patrol sat wrapped in emergency blankets, being treated by the team medic. They kept looking at Ariana with a mixture of awe and confusion. Finally, one of them, a young sergeant named Davidson, worked up the courage to speak. "Ma'am? The guys are saying you made the shot that took out their sniper. That true?" Ariana, staring out the window at the darkness, nodded once. "How far?" 1,360 meters. "Give or take." Davidson shook his head slowly. "In that storm? That's not humanly possible." "It's possible," Ariana said quietly, still not looking at him. "You just have to be willing to listen, to wait, to trust that when the moment comes, you'll be ready." She finally turned, meeting his eyes. "And you have to be willing to do whatever it takes to protect the people counting on you." Holland, listening from his seat across the cabin, understood something in that moment. This wasn't just about skill or training. This was about someone who had watched their entire team die and made a promise to herself that it would never happen again. Someone who had turned herself into a weapon not out of anger, but out of love. The deadliest kind of soldier there was. When they landed back at Fort Greely, an unexpected reception was waiting. The base commander himself, along with what looked like half the installation's personnel, word had spread about the rescue, about the shots that shouldn't have been possible. Holland stepped off the Chinook first, giving his report to the commander, but everyone's eyes kept drifting to the small figure behind him, the woman with the scar who carried her rifle like it was part of her body. The commander, Colonel Sarah Martinez, approached Ariana directly. "Specialist Hale, I'd like a word." "Yes, ma'am." They walked a short distance from the crowd. Martinez studied Ariana for a long moment. "I just got off the phone with JSOC. They're very interested in what happened tonight. Apparently, the hostile sniper you neutralized was someone they've been hunting for 3 years." Ariana's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her pale eyes. "Victor Volkov. You knew." "I knew. That's why I'm here." Martinez nodded slowly. "They also told me about the Alps, about your team, about what happened to you." She paused. "They said you had a choice after you recovered. Medical retirement with full honors. Instead, you chose to come back, to keep hunting." "I wasn't hunting, ma'am." Ariana's voice was soft but firm. "I was finishing my mission, protecting my team. That's what snipers do. Even if it costs everything? Especially then." Martinez was quiet for a moment, then extended her hand. "Welcome to Fort Greely, Specialist Hale, and thank you. Those 4 soldiers are going home to their families because of you." Ariana shook the offered hand. "That's all that matters, ma'am." As Martinez walked away, Holland approached. "The team wants to buy you a drink. Well, several drinks. Possibly all the drinks." For the first time since she'd arrived, Ariana smiled. It was small, tentative, like someone remembering how. "I don't drink much." "Neither do we. But tonight seems like an exception." He gestured toward the rec room, where the team was already gathering. "Come on, Frostbite. Let us properly welcome you to Delta Force." She hesitated, old instincts telling her to retreat, to maintain distance. But then she thought about Captain Morrison, about the team she'd lost, about the promise she'd made to never let herself become so isolated again. "All right," she said quietly, "one drink." 3 days after the rescue operation, Fort Greely slowly returned to normal operations. The storm had finally broken, leaving behind a landscape of pristine white, broken only by the dark shapes of buildings and equipment. The temperature had warmed to a relatively balmy -15. In the long-range firing complex, someone had placed a steel target plate at the edge of the practice range, not at 2,200 meters, where records had been set before. At 2,350 meters, the exact distance of Ariana's Christmas Eve shot, Chen discovered it first during an early morning equipment check. The plate had been mounted on a permanent stand and bore fresh weld marks where someone had attached a metal plaque. The engraving was simple. "Frostbite. One shot changed everything. Christmas Eve, 2025. He stood staring at it for several minutes before pulling out his radio. "Holland, you need to see this." By the time the sun rose as much as it did this far north in winter, the entire sniper team had gathered at the range. They stood in a semicircle around the steel target, breath misting in the cold air, each lost in their own thoughts. "Who did this?" Patterson asked finally. "Does it matter?" Holland replied. "It's true. Ariana arrived last, having been summoned by Chen's message." She stopped at the edge of the group, seeing the target and the plaque, and for a long moment, said nothing. "It's too much," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's not enough," Holland countered. He turned to face her. "Hale, I've been in this unit for 8 years. I've worked with some of the best snipers in the world. I've never seen anything like what you did that night. Not just the shot, though, Christ knows that alone was impossible, but the tactical awareness, the certainty, the absolute refusal to let your team down. I was just doing my job." "No," Chen stepped forward. "Your job was to provide overwatch support. You did that and then delivered 3 consecutive shots at over 1,000 meters in conditions that should have made accurate fire impossible. You saved 4 soldiers' lives, and eliminated a high-value target that intelligence agencies on 3 continents had been hunting for years. He paused. That's not just doing your job, that's being exceptional at it. Ariana looked at each of them in turn, then back at the steel plate. I lost my team, she said quietly. 3 years ago, I lost everyone I cared about because I wasn't good enough, wasn't fast enough. I've spent every day since then trying to make sure it never happens again. Her hand unconsciously touched the scar on her face. This shot, that night, it wasn't exceptional. It was necessary, because the alternative was watching more people die. But they didn't die, Patterson said. His tone had lost all of its earlier skepticism. They're alive because you were here, because you took a shot nobody else could make. He moved closer to the target, running his hand along the steel surface. This stays here, Hale. So every sniper who comes through this facility knows what's possible, what's expected. It'll set an impossible standard, Ariana protested. Good. Holland's voice was firm. Let it be impossible. Let it be the target we all reach for and maybe never hit. Because reaching for impossible is how we save lives, how we protect our people, how we honor the ones we've lost. The last words hit Ariana hard. She closed her eyes, and for a moment, she was back in the Alps. Snow and blood, the weight of Captain Morrison, the faces of her team. But when she opened her eyes, she wasn't alone in the snow anymore. She was here, in Alaska, surrounded by a new team. One that had accepted her, not despite her past, but because of it. Thank you, she said softly. The team stood in silence for a few more moments, a kind of impromptu memorial for all the shots taken, all the lives saved, all the soldiers who would never stop reaching for impossible. Finally, Chen broke the silence. So, I've been thinking, if that's the new standard, we should probably start practicing. Patterson laughed. Yeah, good luck with that. I'll be happy if I can hit that target, period, never mind in a blizzard. That's the spirit, Holland said dryly. He looked at Ariana. Feel like teaching a masterclass, frostbite? Ariana considered for a moment, then nodded. All right. But first rule, stop trying to fight the conditions. Start learning to use them. Over the next several hours, as the weak Arctic sun traced its low arc across the sky, Ariana taught the team things they'd never learned in any formal training. How to read wind not just with instruments but with observation. How to feel the air pressure changes that preceded gusts. How to find stillness within chaos. Most importantly, she taught them that sometimes the difference between success and failure wasn't about equipment or training or even skill. It was about will, about refusing to accept the impossible. By mid-afternoon, Chen had managed a hit at 2,000 meters, his personal best. Patterson pushed his range to 2,100. Even Holland, who'd been shooting for 15 years, found his accuracy improving as he learned to see the wind the way Ariana did. They were packing up equipment when Martinez's voice came over the radio. All personnel, attention. Be advised, we have a VIP arriving at 1,600 hours. All senior staff report to the command center. Holland groaned. VIP visits. Exactly what we need. Who is it? Chen asked. Probably some congressman wanting a photo op, Patterson muttered. They always show up right after an operation goes public. But when they reached the command center, they found Martinez standing with someone unexpected, a woman in her late 40s, wearing civilian clothes but carrying herself with unmistakable military bearing. Her left arm was in a sling, and she had the weathered look of someone who'd spent years in harsh environments. Ariana stopped dead when she saw her. Captain Morrison, she breathed. Elizabeth Morrison turned, and her face broke into a smile. Hello, Frostbite. Told you I'd see you again. They met in the middle of the room, and for several seconds, just stood looking at each other. Then, Morrison pulled Ariana into a one-armed hug, and the walls that Ariana had built so carefully over 3 years finally cracked. I thought you'd retired, Ariana said, her voice thick. I did. Medical discharge last year. But when I heard about the operation, about Volkov, Morrison stepped back, keeping one hand on Ariana's shoulder. I had to come, had to make sure you were all right. I'm fine. Liar. But Morrison said it gently. I know what he meant to you, what finishing that mission cost. Ariana glanced at Holland and the team, who were trying to give them privacy while still being obviously curious. Captain Morrison saved my life, she said quietly. After the ambush, After I dragged her to cover and took the shot at Volkov, I collapsed. Lost too much blood. She kept me alive until extraction arrived. Refused to let the medics work on her until they'd stabilized me. You saved me first, Morrison corrected. Pushed me out of the way of that grenade. Took the hit yourself. She touched the scar on Ariana's face gently. This should have killed you. Instead, you used it as motivation to become even better. That's who you are, Aria. You don't quit. You don't break. You become stronger. Martinez cleared her throat. Captain Morrison isn't just here for a reunion. She's been consulting with JSOC on counter-terrorism operations in Arctic environments. When she heard about your performance during the rescue, she requested permission to observe your training methods. Morrison nodded. The shot you made, 1,360 meters in near whiteout conditions, it's already being studied at every sniper school in NATO. They want to know how you did it, how to teach others to do it. You can't teach it, Ariana said immediately. Not really. It's not about technique. It's about listening, Morrison finished. About trusting yourself. About refusing to accept that anything is truly impossible. She smiled. Which is exactly what I told them. But they want to try anyway. And they want you to help. Ariana looked uncertain. I'm not an instructor. You're the best sniper I've ever worked with, Morrison said firmly. And more than that, you're someone who understands what it means to lose everything and keep fighting anyway. That's worth more than all the technique in the world. Holland stepped forward. For what it's worth, Hale, I think you'd be excellent at it. You've already helped my team improve more in one afternoon than they have in 6 months. We need people like you, Martinez added. People who push boundaries, who show others what's possible. Ariana was quiet for a long moment, her eyes distant. Then she looked at Morrison. Will you stay, help with the training? For as long as they'll let me. Morrison squeezed her shoulder. We're a team, Aria. We always have been. That doesn't change just because we're not in the Alps anymore. The weight that Ariana had been carrying, the guilt, the isolation, the feeling that she'd survived when others hadn't began, finally, to ease. Not gone, perhaps never gone, but lighter. All right, she said softly. I'll do it. But on one condition. Name it, Martinez said. Ariana gestured to Holland and his team. They're part of it. This isn't just about me. It's about building a team that doesn't break, that protects each other, that refuses to leave anyone behind. Holland smiled. I think we can manage that. 1 year later, the long-range firing complex at Fort Greely had been transformed. The steel target at 2,350 meters remained, but it had been joined by others at increasing distances. A new training program had been established, one that focused not just on technical skill, but on the mental resilience and team cohesion that made impossible shots possible. Ariana Hale, now officially assigned as a senior instructor, stood with Captain Morrison and Sergeant Holland watching a new class of snipers attempt the qualification course. The conditions were nearly identical to that Christmas Eve a year ago. Heavy snow, brutal wind, temperatures in the -30s. Any of them going to make it? Morrison asked. 3 of them have a chance, Ariana replied, not taking her eyes off the shooters. The one on the left, Corporal Hayes, she's got the instinct, just needs to trust it more. As if on cue, Hayes settled into her firing position and went completely still. Ariana smiled. The stillness was the key. The moment when a sniper stopped being a person and became part of the environment, part of the weapon, part of the shot itself. Hayes fired. The bullet arced through the storm and struck the 2,100-meter target with a resonant clang. The observation team erupted in applause. Hayes stood up, grinning, and looked back at Ariana for approval. Ariana gave her a nod and a small smile. Good shooting, Hayes. Now do it again. The grin faded slightly, replaced by determination. Yes, ma'am. Holland laughed. You're a harsh instructor, Frostbite. I'm a thorough instructor, Ariana corrected. 1 good shot is luck, 2 is skill, 3 is mastery. She watched Hayes resettle into position. They need to understand the difference. The way you did, Morrison said softly. Ariana didn't answer immediately. She thought about that Christmas Eve, about the shot that had changed everything, about the long road from the Alps to Alaska, about loss and survival, and the slow, painful process of learning to trust again. The way we all do, she said finally, every single day. That evening, The team gathered in the rec room for their annual Christmas celebration. It had become tradition now, the Delta Force sniper team and their instructors, sharing stories and bad coffee, marking another year of impossible shots and saved lives. Someone had hung a banner above the doorway. "Let me take one shot." It had become the unit's unofficial motto, a reminder that sometimes all you needed was one opportunity, one moment of clarity, one refusal to accept defeat. Patterson raised his glass. "To Frostbite, for showing us what's possible." To the team, Ariana countered, "For showing me I didn't have to do it alone." They drank, and outside, snow began to fall again over the frozen Alaskan landscape. Another storm, another challenge, another opportunity to prove that impossible was just a word. In the weapons locker, the M2010 that had made the legendary shot rested in its case. Someone had attached a small tag to the stock: Frostbite, 2,350 meters, Christmas Eve 2025. Tomorrow, it would go back into service. Because the rifle wasn't special, the conditions weren't special, the target wasn't special. What was special was the person willing to take the shot when nobody else could, when everything said it was impossible, when the only thing standing between success and failure was will. That was what Ariana had learned in the Alps, what she'd proven in Alaska, what she now taught to every sniper who passed through her course. The wind doesn't hate you, it doesn't help you, it just tells you what needs to be done. The rest is up to you. Ariana stood by the window, watching the snow fall, and thought about the coming year, about the students who would challenge themselves at that steel target, about the impossible shots they would attempt and sometimes, miraculously, make, about the lives that would be saved because someone refused to accept that it couldn't be done. Morrison came to stand beside her. "What are you thinking about?" Ariana smiled, a real smile now, one that came easier than it had a year ago. "I'm thinking about next Christmas, about pushing the target back another 150 meters. Ambitious, always." Ariana turned from the window. "That's what keeps us alive. That's what makes us better. That's what honors the ones we've lost." Morrison nodded, understanding. In this frozen corner of the world, surrounded by people who had chosen to stand against the impossible, they had found something precious. Not redemption that was too simple, but purpose, community, hope. "Next Christmas," Morrison said, raising her glass. "Let's go further." Next Christmas, Ariana agreed. Outside, the wind howled across the tundra, carrying snow and ice and the promise of endless challenges. But inside Fort Greely, in a room filled with soldiers who had learned to listen to the wind instead of fighting it, there was warmth and laughter, and the unshakable certainty that whatever came next, they would face it together, one shot at a time.